Jingle All The Way is, on the surface, a generic Christmas action comedy, but it also has a lot it wants to say about capitalism and consumerism in America. Unfortunately, it never really seems to make a solid point about either of them. Now, this whole video is going to have spoilers, so if you ever intend to watch it, I'd turn back now. So the premise is pretty straightforward. We got little baby Anakin who wants a popular TV show action figure called Turbo Man, and his dad over here, the butcher of Bakersfield, is Mr. Workaholic who's been too busy to remember to get it. And now he has to try and get one before Christmas, otherwise he'll end up disappointing his son for the 100th time. Before getting too into the weeds, one of the things I think the movie does well is its distinct characters. Arnold is the mattress salesman and Sinbad is a mailman. Each encompass the private and public sector workers in their struggle in navigating the American economy. Phil Hartman plays the opposite of his real-life persona in the role of a scumbag womanizer, and Rita Wilson is the supportive mom who doesn't fall for his charms because, well, she's married to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Then there's the side characters like the cop, Beavis and Butthead, and Mafia Santa and his crook elves. Maybe I'm setting the bar low with this comparison, but each character here is somehow more interesting than all of the 2016 Suicide Squad characters. But for a movie with such low ratings, I don't think you'd expect each character to have some importance to the plot, with their own individual arcs with decent conclusions. Getting into the anti-capitalism, let's say that Schwarzenegger's character Howard represents all white-collar workers trying to make their way through a capitalist society. He works long hours at the detriment of his family life, and to make up for it, he neglects them even more in the pursuit of the action figure, as if this one thing will make up for a consistent pattern of disregard. His career taking precedence over everything else is not something to be commended, as is often idealized in the United States. And the anti-materialism comes into play relatively quickly as we see how ridiculous his pursuit of the action figure is. Let's just take one scene and see how topical it is even today.
No, there's gotta be another one here somewhere.
There are none here. Oh, excuse me.
Yes?
I'm trying to find a
PS5.
Me too.
Do you have any more in the back?
These guys are looking for a...
PS5.
Yes.
PS5.
Hey, everybody! These two are looking for a...
PS5.
Shut up, man!
Now, what's so funny?
While the movie is 25 years old now, this scene shows that we're all at the mercy of supply and demand, something not just present in a capitalist society, but in all economies. Except maybe Star Trek, where you can make things out of thin air. But even then, most supply problems in the US aren't related to necessities. In the US, feeding people is less of a scarcity problem and more of a distribution problem, as we throw out over 100 billion pounds of food every year. But we still frenzy over things like Black Friday deals and luxuries that we don't really need. I think the movie is not so subtly satirizing America's overconsumption through Arnold's pursuit of the action figure. Just look at all he's willing to do to get something he thinks he needs. He nearly breaks Sinbad's back.
This is war.
He damages an officer's motorcycle. He chases down a little girl and grabs her for the chance to maybe get a Turbo Man doll.
Give me the ball. I got it. Ow!
Sicko! Pervert!
He performs a back alley deal with an underground organization.
You know what you guys are? Nothing but a bunch of sleazy con men in red suits.
He impersonates a detective.
Detective Howard Lang, undercover.
He breaks into a radio station.
Help me!
He's an accessory to a bomb threat.
Back up. This is a homemade explosive device, and I'll blow it up. Know why? Because I work for the post office, so you know I'm not stable.
He breaks into a house to steal his neighbor's son's Turbo Man doll. He nearly sets that same house on fire.
No.
And then there's impersonating Turbo Man himself and endangering his child's life. We can kind of give him a pass for this because he's thrust into this situation against his will, but it's still the most egregious. And while individually I definitely don't think that these are a critique on our economic situation, I do think that as a whole they are, because slightly before these events kick off, Sinbad has some pretty colorful language to say regarding consumerism.
You know it's all a ploy, don't you?
Employee.
Man, where have you been? Don't you watch TV?
We are being set up by rich and powerful toy cartels.
Oh, come
now you got
on.
these big fat cats sit there using working class just like me and you. They spend billions of dollars on TV advertisement, and then they sit there and use subliminal messages to suck your children's minds out. And I know what I'm talking about because I went to junior college for a semester and I studied psychology, so I'm right in there. I know what's going on. And then they sit there making kids feel like garbage, and you, the father, who's working 24/7, and living now, seem like an alloy in it, so I want to mess up with everybody and one mother but me.
So this little rant that Sinbad goes on is why I'm reading more into the movie than is probably necessary, but it makes me think that the director is trying to say something here about capitalism, consumerism, or even the US. So every subsequent scene or event that happens in the movie makes me think, is he trying to say something here? Like the scene where Arnold busts out what is clearly a plastic badge and convinces a few beat cops that he's actually a detective. This could be a nice critique on cops and authority or blind authority in the United States, but the problem is it's only ever played for as a gag at surface level when the director could go a little deeper. And even though Sinbad's rant about toy monopolies is played in such a way as to portray him as the crazy person, I feel like the journey we go on throughout the movie actually kind of ends up proving his point. It's a shame the movie isn't more heavy-handed with the satire, because I actually feel like it could succeed going in that direction. And while I say that, Arnold was in a movie kind of like that just a few years prior in Last Action Hero, which in my opinion is a really good parody of action movies that pokes fun of the genre, but unfortunately it wasn't well received and not a huge box office success.
Not to be.
But back to this movie. The last thing that I think this movie lost its potential with is a better message in the ending. Arnold literally becomes Turbo Man to win over his son. He becomes the toy personified, and there's a lot that could be said here. While it's hardly fair to judge a movie based on what it isn't, I think had this movie doubled down on the satire and went full-blown Paul Verhoeven, this could have had a really good cult following. Ultimately, I think it's a pretty decent slapstick comedy that anyone under the age of 10 may enjoy. Or myself. What can I say? It's kind of a guilty pleasure.
Let's get out of here.